Welcome back to Tom versus Glory here in Hearthstone Grandmasters. This is our first elimination match of the day. The player who loses this series will sadly not be on broadcast anymore this weekend and will have to try their chances again next week in the next Swiss phase of Grandmasters. They'll still be walking away with at least 3 points, I believe, for coming in top 8. And if they can get themselves through to top 4 tomorrow, then they will be guaranteed at least 4 points going into the round robin phase, which is a very nice way to get things going. But they really want to start things off with a win here. So taking a look at the decks for both these players, it is the Warrior band away from Glory, which again, as we mentioned, is not really what Tom wanted to be doing. From the look of his lineup, he really wants to get rid of that Galakrond Warlock as much as possible. So it really speaks to how good that Warrior is against his lineup.
Indeed. I guess Tom wasn't too prepared for Warrior as a bring at all because it seems like whoever has heard of it in APAC really believes in it and they're confident queuing it up. Maybe he has caught wind of it but didn't really expect it to be brought immediately in week 1. But I will say that it's that Zoo that I feel most worried about in his lineup.
Yes, that definitely does feel the weak link. As we compared it to Staz yesterday, Totem Shaman, which was just looking absolutely miserable, to be honest. Another aggro deck that's doing fairly powerful things. You know, Totemic Reflection, Splitting Axe is pretty powerful, as is the Imprisoned Scrap Imp, as is Canrathad. These are powerful things the deck can do, but just not quite powerful enough when you're facing down Altruis, Kael'thas as well, in addition to just all the general degenerate stuff that Demon Hunter can do over the course of a game. But we'll see. Maybe he can just get one win here today.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned those two specific cards because that kind of gives me hope that maybe decks like Totem Shaman and Zoo could see more play if those two specifically get nerfed, and they will be soon enough.
Yes, exactly. We'll have to see coming into the next few weeks if anything can change around. But for the moment, it definitely does feel like Zoo Warlock, you know, if it is going to exist, maybe needs a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of a different play style if it's going to be getting the wins in these matchups. Or at the very least, maybe the rest of the meta needs to shift. If there's more decks that are vulnerable to Zoo, then it can start coming into the forefront. But for the most part for Tom, I think it is going to be the other decks that he is relying on taking the wins. And also, to be fair, when we go into next week's Swiss phase and we are playing instead of Conquest, Last Hero Standing, exactly. Maybe then, when each deck doesn't necessarily need to take a win, you can take a little bit more of a risk. Maybe there will be more people bringing Zoo, just because you can go a little bit out there to try and get one deck that can storm your opponent's lineup.
Yeah, or just in general with Last Hero Standing, you want to have 3 decks that shore up each other's weaknesses.
Yeah.
When one loses, you want to, you played rock, your opponent played paper, you're going to bring out your scissors next. Not to simplify it too much, but yeah, there could definitely be more room for innovation should the nerfs have hit that time, and even if they haven't, just the format shakeup. And for Tom, other the Zoo, he's got a lot of things going for him, and I would say that the play on the other decks has been very clean throughout the day. I especially like his use of Zephyrus and Shadow Step up against Demon Hunter.
I would agree with that for sure. But we are finally ready to jump into our first game of this match. Glory on the Galakrond Warlock, one of the decks that Tom really didn't want to be facing. And Tom on the Galakrond, the Highlander Galakrond Priest, which to be fair, better matchups for him against the Warlock.
Yeah, it's got a whole lot of value towards the late game, and Galakrond, very different function as to what we've seen it do, Rivius. It's just gonna have the 1 minion removal, but also just be an infinite value generator. You might see Tom prioritize pressing the hero power way more than Rivius Tom.
I like Tom going with the Archmage here because obviously it can set up for a double Holy Nova, maybe even a double Holy Ripple, depending on what is called for in the next few turns. Basically just guarantees him a board clear of some kind over the next few turns.
Yeah, and not that Plague of Flames was in hand, but I wonder if it would even merit a Plague of Flames from Glory in this case. The Morgoth just seems very difficult to remove, especially hidden behind this overconfident Orc's taunt. Seems that
there are still clears available with just double trade Dark Skies if he was terribly afraid. But the thing is, in terms of proactive plays, there's not actually all too much that Vargoth can do in this deck. It's mainly the reactivity where it starts to come into its own.
That's right. It would be scarier if it was a full-out Res Priest, which Grave Runes could then present a huge problem.
Very
but
true.
This is the Highlander from Tom. So looking at the board state now, it seems like the Vargoth isn't actually accomplishing anything additional by using Holy Ripple. And yeah, Tom's gonna go for the Escape Mana Saber. And was it Hunter Ace who called this Ramp Priest because you're just playing the one Mana Saber?
Yeah, I mean, well, I actually matched up against Shao T on ladder, who added me afterwards, who was playing Hunter Ace's priest deck of double Mana Saber and all the Grave Runes and nonsense like that, and he said they made it together and they think it's really, really powerful.
Sorry, it's not Highlander then. So
yes, no, sorry, yes, a slightly different version. But
and the Mana Saber,
same principle.
Even if it's not necessarily ramping into a big minion, maybe for Glory it's scary enough that he wants to use the Dark Skies option this turn to prevent an early Galacon.
Yeah.
Looks like he is not going to respect it though. I can get behind this.
Not a bad draw in the Kronks. Doesn't fill things out now. But I guess, given the play, well, I was going to say it could have been Galacron, actually, if we wanted to just go for it now to get the Kronks out next turn. But this feels fine as well. Galacron next turn, and then probably Kronks thereafter. The only thing that Tom's really missing now is just a little bit of card draw, actually, which is kind of lacking in Priest at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people have been saying that Priest, with all the buffs to their basic card set and the new cards recently, they're basically just one very strong card draw effect away from being a tier 1 deck. In any case though, even though it's not direct card draw, at least Galacron can generate things to do.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That just being able to spam that hero power as a huge mana sink every turn is very, very valuable. As long as you're not dying.
And we see Tom invest the mana into playing Galacron, even though he's not really removing anything, just to be able to get that hero power online. And I absolutely agree.
Galacron.
The question now is whether the Kronks comes down this turn, and I think it largely depends on what comes off of this hero power. Because he could technically just Holy Nova this away.
Yeah, what does Waste Warden do? Like, Shadow Madness Waste Warden gets you a 3/3 in play and clears the board, which is not nothing. Worth considering at least.
Isn't the Waste Warden more powerful to remove demons after a Galacron? I don't know. I feel that card could have way more potential.
I don't know. Maybe it's only 3 damage though, right? So after Galacron comes down, like it doesn't just kill them.
That's fair. I mean,
and like I'd say that Kronks actually has more removal power against that than the Waste Warden does.
I was kind of looking at it in combination with, but you bring up a good point. Like a lot of demons these days are even bigger than 5 health because of the expansion.
Okay, he's going for it. This makes sense. I was going to say, if he was going to go for removal here on the 5 damage AoE, I really wouldn't like this play. But given that he's taken a slightly more proactive approach, I'm definitely more on board with it.
Can get behind it. Unfortunately for Tom, though, Glory's got a pretty good to remove these 2 minions.
And like, you always have to assume that he has some way of clearing there, be it Plague of Flames or Dark Skies or whatever. And therefore, maybe it should have just been a hero power turn there, and instead of going with the Kronks, because even if you're not developing the Kronks, you don't have that much fear of falling behind, because you can just use the Kronks as removal if you need to.
Indeed. And it's not the best feeling use of the Waste Warden, but Tom just didn't generate a good enough minion that he's just had to play it for tempo. And now Glory, this doesn't look particularly scary from Tom. He's also just got a taunt. Is it time to just slam down an Alexstrasza, maybe?
I wonder.
I like
I think
taking the aggressive approach.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think it's just a different route you can take to get to the aggressive approach. Like, you can still put a lot of damage in here, chip off the 5 armor this turn, and then next turn, when you have that bigger board, you go for Alexstrasza then.
Yeah, makes sense. This is also just very clean with the Netherwing and the Devoted
Yes.
Maniac. Gives you a wider board, removes everything on Tom's side, and just kind of makes Tom have an AoE. He's actually choosing to prioritize draw over the Devoted Maniac. Interesting.
Yeah, that is a little bit surprising.
I don't know. I generally like spending the mana, but just tempoing out the Morgue. Isn't this very scary? With Holy Nova or even Breath of the Infinite? And
Yeah, this is very
available.
scary.
What?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I necessarily like this. Like,
The Morgue
like you said,
is symmetrical, guys, not just your own spells.
the Devoted Maniac was just so clean as well. It got the most amount of attack on board. You can set up for a really strong Alexstrasza next turn. I guess you were very weak to Holy Nova or Breath of the Infinite, but you're weak to this anyway.
In any case, I don't feel like Glory is behind by any measure. He's got so much more value than Tom, and Tom is not playing the burst that Glory has. So the difference in health total is not very relevant, I would say. We're seeing it again from Glory, prioritizing development and then playing the Alexstrasza. Okay, this could get something done.
Easiest Alexstrasza of his life, and with Malygos and Caligos, the Goosey Bros, they are coming down, and hopefully we'll be able to clear up everything here.
Yeah, there's quite a few things you can discover with Malygos that just get powered up. My goodness, a free mind control.
Is that good though? Would you rather just go for Soul Mirror this turn and take Apotheosis? I don't know.
I mean, I want value. Look at the hands.
Fair enough.
I wasn't sure about playing it this turn, but yeah, I was thinking about Soul Mirror there, but maybe Tom is more concerned about having removal for the Galakron. And it's not even necessarily just removal. Soul Mirror could just generate him value off of the opposing Galakron. So
it's so unfortunate for Glory that he used the Moarg early, because he could just go like Moarg, Plague of Flames here, and then Galakron after to clear everything up and get a huge board.
It's look pretty weird to me. The way he's going with the Alexstrasza, it looks like it's even just going to be Plague of Flames.
It looks that way, yeah.
And to be fair, Tom doesn't have a great development play for this turn. Outside of the hero power getting something good.
He has Malygos into Natalie Celine, his own Malygos.
Oh no, one cost minion, one of the new ones, and sadly, Holy Smite can no longer go face, guys. Only minions.
That is actually really bad for him, yeah. Is that a new animation that they got on Malygos? I don't remember.
Maybe. Just added the wings on all of the big dragons.
It's pretty cool.
So Dark Skies with the Galakron Claw should be enough to get rid of the Malygos.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even necessarily have to bother killing the Malygos, because there's not much that can go face anymore, but I guess it can clear your board very easily. And with the Antaean off the Galakron, this is starting to look pretty good for Glory.
With the Soul Mirror, though, if the Fiendish Servant goes off first, well, I guess it goes off for both of them. Well, that's the Tom could have done with this hand. He's, of course, saving Zephyrus for something more impactful. His Glory's just getting started in terms of the value he has. But doesn't even matter because he's got lethal.
Yeah, very easily closes out the game there with the Claw as well. Glory comes 1 game to 0 up. And maybe in that one game sample size that I'm basing it on, where I think this beat a Warlock earlier on, it was maybe not such a good assumption to make, because it feels like in that matchup, the Priest, even though they hit Galakron and Kronks and a whole lot of good curve at the start of the game, they just really ran out of draw, they ran out of stuff to do. Whereas obviously the Galakron Warlock is in no danger ever of running out of card draw with the Veiled Worshippers and the hero power. If anything, they have too much to be throwing down in one whole game. It just really felt like the Priest was getting outclassed there.
Yeah, the Highlander Priest definitely feels a bit more iffy in this matchup, but I will say that the actual Galakron Priest that we've seen from Rivius, I think that still has maybe potential to be favored in the matchup. Again, we don't have the sample sizes, but this is not Rivius's match. Tom has a lot to climb up to just try and get back in the game, and he's not even out of the woods with the zoo yet, and that's what we were most worried about.
Yeah, it is going to be, that's the his Achilles heel, I suppose, if you will, going into this series. Still needs to be able to get a win with that, and we're going to be able to see if he can do it after we take another short break before the rest of this series here in Hearthstone Grandmasters. Welcome back to Hearthstone Grandmasters here in the Asia-Pacific region. We already have our first player going through to the top 4 tomorrow in Possessi, but we need to find out who's going to be joining him out of Rivius, who is still in the decider match, waiting for either tom60229 or Glory, as we can see here. Could be a full Japanese squad going through from day 2 here through to Sunday, or Tom and Rivius could upset that. Glory looks to be in a good spot to take the win here, though, at least with Tom 1 game behind and still with that already infamous Zoo deck holding him behind.
Definitely. Although I will say that the next matchup, if Tom's previous Highlander Rogue versus Demon Hunter is any indication, be a bit comfortable for Tom. He did have a very good start that time after the Shadow Step into getting SI7, or even if he had gotten something different, he had the Miscreant. Now things could look a little bit different, and Glory has a pretty premier starting hand.
He really does, but tom60229, the absolute Madicus Ladicus that he is, threw away Edwin Van Cleef on the coin. Have you ever heard of anything so ridiculous in your life, Gia?
Many things to come out of your mouth, in fact, are. Oh my gosh. It's getting to that time of day where I'm so bored I just need to throw out insults. Just kidding. We've had so many great matches today, I can't even believe. Just it's alone have been a ton of fun. But honestly, if there's any matchup where you toss away Edwin, I could see it being against Demon Hunter, because they just have so many convenient ways to trade up into minions very well. Not to mention, when you're playing Highlander, you're cutting a lot of the low-cost spells that make Edwin more consistently a large dude in the early game.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I'm kind of going back and forth. Like, my initial instinct is it's still just a 3-mana 4/4 if you coin it out. That's so good. But I guess if they're playing the Satyr Overseer, then that just trades into it beautifully. So who knows? I don't know. Let me know what you think, if he was right or wrong. But it was an interesting decision nonetheless. But it's worked out really nicely for him now. The curve of the stealthed Skyvatir into a Bamboozle means that if Glory ever tries to trade into this, he's going to be met with a very nasty surprise.
I mean, good for him. He's Demon Hunter. Those don't really know how to trade. But I really liked your question a while ago. Let me know what you think. I wasn't sure if you were talking to me or talking to chat, because we are in YouTube now. So we're on YouTube, which means that, you guys can let us know what you think in the comments.
Exactly. Unlike the previous platform? Oh, anyway. Satyr Overseer coming down probably on curve here could lead into a very nice setup with the 2/2 coming down as well. But instead, he's just going to go a little bit wider here. Save the Satyr Overseer, I guess because of how powerful it is with Warglaives of Azzinoth. And to be fair, if he has other stuff to spend his mana on for the next few turns, why not?
Yeah, we did see that. Of course, Tom wasn't on Rogue, he was on Zoo at the time, but the way he lost against the previous Demon Hunter was out-Zoo'd as Zoo by the Warglaives Satyr Overseer. Just insanity.
I believe now that Glory has narrowed it down to one of the 2 remaining Rogue secrets. He hasn't played a spell, so it could still be Dirty Tricks, but he's played a minion, so it's not Ambush. So I think the safest course of action is definitely just to start plugging everything to the face and not even worry about all that nonsense. Maybe he hasn't even thought of it.
Makes everything very simple for us, and it just is the Bible. Like the for Demon Hunter, it's just the first commandment is that if you can force your opponent to trade for you, you do that, because you just net more damage in the first place. You just cover up their board, ship it all straight to Valera.
I'm not necessarily sure how I feel about the choice to go for Seal Fate on the 4/2 Satyr there instead of sapping it, because giving them a 5-mana Satyr is, like, I feel a lot less useful than a 4-mana Sightless Watcher. I guess they're both pretty bad.
The argument is that it could be replayed again this turn, and argue, and a Glory would also have that weapon active immediately. Granted, that's still much weaker than what Demon Hunter tends to do.
Yeah.
But I feel like he'd be much more upset about playing Sightless Watcher. So I agree with Mom's sap choice.
Finally goes in for a trade here, does Glory. certain if it was still correct to go for there. I think he could have maybe just kept on plowing face the last few turns. But I think he's still in a very, very good spot. And now he's very possibly going to stick a board for a couple turns as well.
Right. Tom now out of good minions to play. Nothing that's even rushable with the Lackey. He has at least got backstab, and if he wants to take another 2 damage, the hero power, but it's getting to the point where he might even just eviscerate this, even though it feels extremely gross.
Yeah, you're never happy to do this, but maybe he can draw himself a couple of extra cards, as it looks like Spectral Sight is probably how Glory's going to start the turn.
With the draw of the Cane, though, it now just opens up the possibility of just not playing Spectral Sight. And with the Cane played, he will confirm that it's dirty tricks because he's seen Bamboozle.
True.
And if the ambush doesn't go off upon him, he can narrow it down. As Highlander Rogue only plays one of everything.
All right, Sherlock Holmes, calm down.
Mm-hmm. I'm not the one amongst us both. How can I be Sherlock?
Because you're the only one with a brain.
No, Derek, remember, with our brain cells combined.
Oh yeah, of course. Woof. That's not the one. Yeah, it's got to be Kronks as the only reasonable option. And then just pray that somehow Glory does not have lethal. Never mind.
Classic Demon Hunter.
What do you know? It turns out the difference between having Zephrys and Shadow Step in the first couple of turns versus not having that combination of cards is pretty stark. Props to Glory. You know, it's a relatively minor thing to realize that the Skyver was something that shouldn't be traded into, but if he had done that, he very possibly would have lost that game, or at the very least would have massively diminished his chances. So I think he played that very, very well. The only thing I guess you could dispute was maybe at the end when he started trading, whether that was even worth it. But I think either way, he let himself be in a position where he was very likely to win the game.
Absolutely. It reminds me a lot of, just a very recent matchup just in the previous between the Dragon Hunter Mirror, where when one person plays Snake Trap, you generally just never trade again. It's just not worth the investment. And if you're falling that far behind, you're not winning anyway. So it makes a lot of sense there that you would apply the same principles to Rogue Secrets.
Yeah, exactly. You need the little old school life coach real life add-on where you just put a piece of paper over your screen with just a little hole cut out for the enemy hero. Because you don't need to know about anything else on the opponent's side of the board.
Yeah, that is the best Hearthstone plugin there is. Sorry, HS Replay. So we are now moving on to Game 3. Glory now just one win away with his Druid from being able to possibly face Rivius.
That's right, just the Druid left. It is a list that I've been a little bit hard on. I have been saying I don't like it. To be fair, I haven't liked it because it's been consistently queuing into Control Warrior, which obviously it's going to be a bad matchup. You need a little bit more chunk, a little bit more late game oomph to the deck if you're going to be taking down a Control Warrior. But up against what Tom has left in obviously the Warlock, the Rogue, and the Priest, I feel like this list should be perfectly fine. You've still got the Mount Sellers, the Kael'thas, and all the early ramp goodness to get you going.
I will say that if this ends up being one of the more standard Druid lists, it's going to make a lot of new players happy. It's very wallet friendly, under 4,000 dust to make the whole deck. Something very different from the Highlander Rogue we see from Tom. That's playing every Rogue legendary and then all the Highlander and the legendaries.
Yeah, that's right. The only legendary in the list is one that you get for free, just for logging in during Ashes of Outland. So yeah, very new player friendly deck. Not a very Derek friendly deck though when I lose to it 50 billion blooming times.
You saying you're not a new player, Darren?
Pretends I didn't hear that one, Gia.
All right. So Glowfly Swarm in the opener for Glory, but he's choosing not to keep it. And I'm seeing this more and more often when these Druid decks are queuing into any class that has just a good answer for 2/2s. And Priest definitely falls under that category.
Yeah, it's not quite so stark as against the Res Priests, which often run 2 Breath of the Infinite, 2 Holy Novas, or of course Rivius's Galakron Priest, which also runs the same. But I agree, just the threat of it coming down early is so devastating. You would much rather find the draw or the ramp, as that is our 3rd Kael'thas of the day being discarded off of Fungal Fortunes. It's not over yet, again. It's perfectly reasonable to just ramp up, get down the Glowfly Swarm, maybe with a Soul of the Forest, but that still hurts.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems so strange that it's happened so often, particularly today. But yeah, I agree that Glory is not out of it by any means. He can not just Glowfly, but he can Glowfly Innervate Power of the Wild. Gets it out of the range, Holy Nova, and of Breath of the Infinite. And that is, like, very worrisome for Tom had he not had Waystword. And these are beasts, aren't they? Are they not?
Yes, sorry, these are beasts. Sorry, yeah, I was setting up something for Greedy Sottle for the next portion of the stream in Europe.
Yeah. If that were Treants, for example, that would have been quite worrisome for Tom. But Waste Warden to the rescue. Glory now, however, still has the refill with the overflow, trying to get to that exotic Mount Seller plan B, perhaps, or even just a second Glowfly. No such luck.
Yeah, this is a list that is incredibly dependent on finding those exotic Mount Sellers. Without it, you are just falling flat on your face because, although it's a little bit old-fashioned now, it feels like the Treant lists with both, Aeroponics and the Force of Nature are, it gives you a little bit more mid-game consistency, maybe at the lack of a power spike in terms of overall capabilities. But I think right now, Glory kind of wishes he was playing something like that.
You actually just run that to play around Wasteboard. Is that the next level of the meta?
No, I played it day 1 because that's what Meaty posted, and whatever Meaty posts, I play.
True enough. Alright, so I expect Glory will begin by cycling somehow, but he has to dump the hands before he can play the Rising Winds. He really needs to get, as we mentioned, exotic Mount Seller or the other Glowfly, because his list, like Possessies, is cutting the Forest.
It is indeed, which again just lowers the power of the deck that you're looking to hit later on in the game. But still, you know, he is turbo drawing through this deck. Eventually, he's got to find something, right?
I mean, with this version more so, I even... Like, we had this discussion about whether you should be including Zephrys or whether people will include Zephrys in Druid in the coming days, and I'm just seeing more and more arguments for it as the matches go on.
Skeletal Dragon looks fantastic here, as it is, wow, especially when it gives you Kalagos, it looks very, very good. But just on its own, high health minion, can start trading against anything Glory's doing. Druid really struggles at dealing with anything like this, and as soon as Tom wrestles board control into his favor, things could massively swing out of control, but exotic Mount Seller off the top might be just in the nick of time to get Glory the win here.
We are talking about a very specific class of beasts that Glory needs. Those with lower health than attack. Lower attack than health. Because Tom has Soul Mirror.
Yeah. Well, as long as he doesn't get any more Dread Ravens, then that will be the case.
There's a fair amount of them that are like same stat line though, 5/5 and 3 and D.
Yeah.
And also we saw there's Zixor.
Ooh, okay, that's something.
Yes, definitely something. And also we saw the Ironback Patriarchs be very problematic because they just put walls of taunt in the way. Yeah.
So the Zixor there, Apex Predator, is one of the new Prime legendaries for the Hunter brought in the most recent expansion. It has a death rattle of shuffling Zixor Prime into your deck, which is an 8-mana 4/4 that summons 3 4/4s, all of which have Rush, which, as you can imagine, is a great bit of extra sustainability that maybe is able to push the Druid over the finish line in this matchup.
Yeah. And Tom actually holding back on the Soul Mirror here, I think correctly identifying that he's able to use his less conditional removal here and still preserve the Skeletal Dragon, which I quite like. Because you know that Soul Mirror is just cleanly removing any sort of Glowfly board in the future, whereas that might not necessarily be a call things like Death and Holy Smite.
Mm-hmm.
The Mount Seller into another Fungal Fortunes. Does he have any innervates left?
That's the thing, right? Because if you do, obviously it's good because you can go for it this turn with a Power of the Wild, but you also kind of want to wait to go Mount Seller, Innovate, Soul of the Forest as well. It's quite a difficult dynamic to strike.
Yeah. Turns out things are pretty tough for this Druid deck when you can't play 20 mana in a turn.
Oh, God. So unfair. Having to spend mana for my cards. What a boomer.
Okay, so Tom has just tons of ways to deal with things. I'm rip. I mean, sure, you can start with a Discover.
Oof.
Another Plague or Soul Mirror. I mean, Plague, of course, being premium. Yeah, I don't see any way out of this for Glory. Of course, from his perspective, he could be hoping that Tom just doesn't have any more AoE left.
Oh my god.
But we can see that every board developed.
Even the Twin Tyrant is looking absolutely nutty. I am just not seeing any way for Glory to take this game. And it's just, again, you know, this is another matchup where the Druid just runs out of stuff.
And he's already spent, so he can't even go for Glowfly and Soul of the Forest.
Yeah, like, is his best chance of winning waiting a turn and then just going for it and praying there's no Plague, let alone 2?
I think his best chance is going for it now and then Power of the Wild, because now Plague is completely off the table, right? Whether or not you play Soul of the Forest, Plague is going to completely lock out the game. So now instead, you're trying to give him as little possible time to draw Plague. So in that case, playing Glowfly and Power of the Wild then still kind of survives through the Holy Nova and through the Breath of the Infinite.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with this way, he's still saying, you know, if you have the removal, I'm losing anyway. The best way he can remove this is obviously with Plague of Death. But, I mean, even he could just go trade Soul Mirror here, and it's the same thing, really.
Or just save your Skeletal Dragon.
Yeah. I guess it would actually have overdrawn if you did that because of the extra dragon, so sure.
Oh, wow. Such a first world problem.
Yeah.
And that has got to be GG. Winner of Glory will go for the self-fatigue with Overflow.
That's style points right there.
Uh-huh.
Or he could just stop wasting everyone's time and concede because the game's over.
Fair enough. So that means Tom will get on the board now. He's still got Rogue and Zoot to try and reverse sweep onto a Druid. And we've seen a fair amount of reverse sweeps throughout the weekend, but none onto Druid, I think. We've seen it onto Galakron Warlock. And yeah, at some point Druid tends to just get there, or at one point you just don't have the answers. So I'm skeptical, but maybe Tom gets there.
All right, there we go. Obviously, the Zixor Prime. Forgot about that for a second, but I think even that, it just trades evenly against Tom's board here. You can have a 4/4 survive. But yeah, that's just going to wrap it up. Glory realizes there's no way he can get there. Tom gets a point on the table, finally, with his Galakron Highlander Priest. But with him still having to get a win with the Rogue and the Zoo up against the Druid, I'm not liking his chances with the rest of the series.
Yeah, especially that Zoo, it just seems so worrisome. And that's definitely one of the matchups where the Druid build that Possessi and Glory have is better, because you don't want to have to wait for Forest Aid or Gift of the Wild. You just are against Zoo. You'd rather just try and turbo out Glowfly Swarm, try and race them with Savage Horde. So yeah, once again, it's the Zoo that's worrisome for Tom.
It is indeed. We'll have to see how it can face. Maybe if there's not the early Glowfly Swarm, it will have more of a chance. Or who knows, if it can get down a early Scrap Imp, that might be the buffs that the rest of his cards need to be able to actually get the job done and swarm onto the board thereafter. I'm not sure if we're going to see it now or the Rogue first. Doesn't really matter. He's got to win with both if he wants to have a chance. But honestly, I'm not even sure if the Rogue has a better chance than the Zoo does. Obviously, you can go crazy with something like a massive early Edwin or cheese out a really early Galakron. But the actual removal capabilities for Rogue, as soon as you fall behind to a big board, you're basically just out of the game.
Yeah, it really does just rely on the single Zephyrus, I would say, in terms of guaranteed board clear, and that's guaranteed based on how Zephyrus sees the game state.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can see the Rogue struggling as well. But Tom is just going to start off with the Zoo. We'll see how that pans out for him. What do you think about tossing the Battle Mage?
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, it's not one of the absolute powerhouse cards you're looking for. I was told, like, while learning this deck, that Battle Mage is like the one drop that you do keep. But I guess he's saying in this matchup you have to go more optimistic than that. You have to say, right, I'm going to hit the Scrap him. I'm going to hit Canrathad Ebonlock. Or maybe you're going to get some kind of a crazy Hand of Gul'dan opening by discarding it with the Expired Merchant as well. I'm not exactly sure. But he has still got himself up to a reasonable start.
Yeah, I mean, he's gotten the egg into Evil Genius. That's at least some pretty good pressure. And yeah, it's just a bit jarring to me as somebody that's loved to play Zoo back in its earliest iterations that you wouldn't keep a 1-mana 2/2, that you would cut Flame him and the like.
That still seems crazy to me. I trust the people who decided to do it are smart enough, like Gallon in particular, I think was the first innovator, but
Whoa,
it feels crazy.
This is looking like old Zoo. Knife Juggler off of the Faceless Lackey, which is pretty much the best Lackey in this situation with.
Yeah, I know.
Worried, however, can respond with a Glowfly as early as now.
Cracking eggs and tossing knives. This is some 2014 Zoo right here.
Huh? Back in my day, the eggs summoned 4/4s, though.
Yeah, that was absurd.
And the Knife Juggler had 3 attack.
That was absurd. Well, way back in my day, you used to have 3 health and 2 attack. That was really busted.
So he's thinking about the Crystal Power. I mean, the Glowfly here would get the whole board, right? Or was it 6 minions? Either way, it's a lot.
It's one
and
off, yeah.
They do kind of get a bit scary with a Knife Juggler, but if you look at it, at most, Tom plays 4 minions, and that's not that many, I would say, and that's very optimistic to say it's the full 4. Then again, though, I guess he doesn't lose too much by waiting 1 turn.
Yeah, I think I like this approach. You know, it's unlikely, I suppose, that the that the Zoo can dominate that much onto the board, that your Glowfly becomes useless. Because even if they do something like this, you're still just trading with their board fairly evenly, which is not a bad spot to be in against Zoo at all.
Yeah, it would only get scary if they still had access to cards like Grim Rally, for example, but the mass board buffs just don't really exist anymore. They have to happen in hand through the scrapping. One thing that could be a little bit worrisome, I suppose, for Glory is if Magic Carpet were in the hand, and then he knows there's at least 1 Lackey remaining.
You were just a bird.
Right, Nightshade Matron. Getting rid of the Soulfire, I think, is not that big of a deal. You're probably okay. You probably want to actually hold on to the Draconic Lackey maybe the most, just so that you have the chance to spend more mana on following turns.
With the order he's done it, though, I feel like Tom was looking to play Soulfire there. Because if you wanted to play any particular 1-drop, you would start with that and
Sure.
then
Yeah,
play
true.
right? So the Evasive is the closest to being able to be played. But
Yeah, I think I like the Evasive there.
Steady takes the Twin Tyrant.
I get what he's going for, that like it can clear off a couple of tokens, but I think just a big 7/7 impossible to deal with spells minion is more valuable.
I also agree. And on top of that, it just seems like if you're waiting till turn 8 and your best play is to just remove 2 tokens and develop something that the Druid can probably ignore, it seems like you're way too far behind anyway. I much prefer the proactive choice, so not too sure about that from Tom. In any case, Glory can go for some type of Power of the Wild and maybe Soul of the Forest with Innervate play.
Yeah, the alternative being Wrath and Hero Power, I suppose. Let's take out a few of these minions and value trade on the rest. Okay, interesting. This is, I suppose, basically the same thing with an eagle thrown into the mix as well.
Yeah. So this is saying that he's trying to get the most value out of the Soul of the Forest and recognizing that Zoo, outside of Magic Carpet, doesn't have a way to remove your stuff without having a board of their own. So Glory's just got a stranglehold on the board right now, and okay. This could be a way for Tom
That's
to...
not bad. He can target, 1 damage to one of the others to kill it, take out the eagle.
Glory gets, I guess, slightly punished by not taking the Soul of the Forest while it was available. It is still available, but a lot weaker than the previous turn.
And the problem is he kind of wants to go for the 3-2 here, just for an extra minion to hit with Soul of the Forest. But if he does that, he can't kill off the carpet, which is almost definitely the thing he needs to do this turn.
Right. Yeah. And so he's actually just going to take the buff and the Soul of the Forest here. I was looking at something like maybe Bog Beam and then use the Wild for Panther and then go for the Soul of the Forest in the next turn. It would have gotten punished by exactly second carpet, which Tom happened to have.
Does look like, though, that Tom is actually starting to wrestle this board back against all the odds.
Yeah. It's somehow he's outvaluing the Druid as a Zoo. But the second that an overflow comes to hand, things could change, but it's not quite there for Glory.
That's the problem for Glory. He's just drawing all the dead cards that need a wide board, but no wide board. It's the problem of running double Savage Roar.
Yeah, we've seen enough this Druid, and even in this matchup where I thought this type of list would be a little bit better against Zoo, now he would much rather have the Forest Aid for next turn's development rather than the other Savage Roar. I guess that's why most of the Druid lists are only running one Savage Roar to begin with. So just a trade and play the Twin Tyrant? Or I guess not.
He's holding back on it for even longer.
Okay. I guess he wants to remove the full 2 minions, and anyway, everything else in hand gets rushed by the carpet.
Yeah. May as well save it when it gets a bit more value.
Trade down with the carpet and then play the Fiendish buff, the Fiendish's health, and then that can take a value trade on the shield. And also play a Shield Bearer to protect his 2-1. There's also a world where you just rush your Shield Bearer into the 3-1 because you gotta push the 1 to face with the carpet.
Sure.
But I don't know. I like the other. I like this play better.
Yeah. Just a really dominant board presence, and it means that pretty much the only out. It's I suppose I was going to say overflow, but you could get that through the fungal fortunes as well. It would be perfectly reasonable to find.
So he's actually choosing to kill off the Fiendish and try to get the immediate attack buff. That's interesting. Okay, Glowfly, just a force of nature here, but the best Glory spot.
Is there any way you can kill 2 minions? There isn't, right? Even if it goes Savage or Hero Power, it's just a little bit off, yeah. And man, that Twin Tyrant for Tom is going to be massive.
Indeed, and we were criticizing this choice, but to be fair, I feel like the Draconid last turn would have put him in a very strong spot too. Yeah, I don't know. But against all odds, the Zoo appears to have outlasted the Druid, but still an overflow off the top could change things. Nope, that is just about the worst one.
Yeah, there's still, I think, 1, maybe 2 more turns where he could get away with it. But it's the window is rapidly closing.
Aside from overflow, you'd even take like an exotic Mount Seller here. Just use a Roar as a generation spell.
That sounds perfectly fine to me.
Oh no! A disaster for Glory. Is he going to use a Roar here just to remove? Oh no! This. Oh, darn! I need to look away. I can't look.
All right, still one more turn,
Yeah.
I would say. If he can get the Mount Seller into the absolute god beasts, then maybe, or
I
obviously
mean,
the Overflow.
even without godlike beast, oh my gosh,
Wow.
that is insane from Tom. I was gonna say even without godlike beast, just having the taunt from the Iron Bar could be really good.
Yeah.
Tom is refilling. Actually, it's just +1 damage on the board, but at least he's now got the hand to definitely close things out if Glory doesn't get something good here. That is not something good.
Looks like we're going to Game 5 here in this series. Glory was 2-0 up, but Tom, against the Druid of all decks, is starting to turn things around. And man, I've got to say, for both Glory and Possessi with this identical Druid deck, it is not looking like the build at the moment, I have to say. It's been struggling against the control decks, it's been struggling against the aggro decks. You know, obviously there, Glory just didn't get any card draw. Like, it's maybe erroneous to suggest that's indicative of how the matchup will play out on average. But at least on today, on the sample size that we're basing it on of today's matches, it is not looking good.
Yeah, Druid really letting Glory down there. For Possessi, it did manage to sneak in a win, but I remember that game being extremely close, relying eventually on the Porcupine to remove an opposing Mount Seller. So it seems like it really is just going to come down to, well, a while ago, both players' weak link decks. Now Tom has his out of the way. So let's see if the Druid can maybe deliver against Rogue. And I guess it has a pretty good shot at this because it's got, I think, no Waste Warden in the Rogue, whereas it was present in the Priest.
Yes, I believe you are correct. Or was that... oh yes, yeah, right you are. In the Priest there was one Waste Warden. I was thinking if that was Rivius who was mainly going for that, but Tom seems to have branched into it as well. Like I said though, I think for the most part here, the Rogue has, similarly to the Zoo, the onus is on them to stay in the lead. They need to be tempoing out right from the start of the game, you know, turn 3 latest, I would say, if they want to be able to survive against the onslaught from Glowfly Swarm, Kael'thas, all that nonsense.
Indeed. And we keep going back to this point, but I really wonder what, aside from Savage Roar, they've added into the deck in the Druid, because we're seeing 2 cards that are included most of the time that aren't in Glory's and Possessi's list. That's Forest Aid and Gift of the Wild. We know that one of the inclusions is Savage Roar, but whatever else was added, just one that for a Forest Aid could have made such a world of a difference throughout the series. But I guess milk's already been spilled, and we've got to see right now if it can get that last chance.
Yeah, I think the problem is that they've gone for double Wrath and double Crystal Power, and I've seen most people go for one or the other, in addition to the Rising Winds, which also not everyone is running. And just, yeah, you know, taking 1 or 2 of those cards out, just for, even just one of them, for one Forest Aid at the top, I think would make a world of difference.
And Gnar on curve, the time it is most powerful. But of course, in Highlander Rogue, you're not really running that many secrets, just one of each, so not that likely to get value. At the very least, though, it's an annoying minion for Glory you have to deal with.
It's a bit of an annoying draw there, given that he pushed the 1 last turn, but
yeah,
curving out with the Grand Mummy, like I said, you know, you got to start curving out, and that's exactly what he's done.
Not the cleanest, but he'll get it. And at the very least, that's a Seal Fate target, because at least the Mummy Death Rattle off something else.
True. Using the
You
coin
always
there
push
is
the one,
far
remember.
from... yes, yeah, far from ideal using the coin there, but it does mean that if he got an Overgrowth off the top, he'd be able to play it on curve next turn, and then beautifully go into Mount Seller on turn 7.
For now, for Glory, though, if he wants to do something, it's just not very impactful with a Wrath. Like, the only minion that actually reduces damage off the board if he Wraths it is the Pharaoh Cat, and that doesn't seem very threatening to begin with. So it looks like he was reaching for a development option instead.
Time waits for no one.
Yeah, I wonder if he was just debating whether to like build a 3-2 with the Rising Winds or with the Power of the Wild. But instead, He's going to respect the Hanar even.
Wow. Oh, okay, yeah.
Sorry, I thought he was going to innervate
Me
and
too.
Wrath, and I would have been extremely shocked by that.
Yes, I think that would have been a huge overreaction, especially when Tom seems to have indicated that he clearly doesn't have any secrets in hand.
I'm a little bit surprised by this Dabber Rope. I wanted to see a Seal Fate after the Grand Mummy attack, actually, and just possibly play a Lackey.
Fair enough. Yeah, I guess it, on average, would bolster your board presence.
Then again, he didn't have a good turn 5 in hand. The problem remains.
Yeah. Well, that's his turn 5 fixed. I'm looking at Zephyrus, Step It, Zephyrus, and then play an Edwin, which Zephyrus will offer you.
Oh, that is so dirty.
I don't know what it will offer the first time. 3 mana left over.
The Animal Companion.
Yeah, maybe Animal Comp or some kind of buff. Is the board wide enough to get offered Power of the Wild? I'm not sure. But it doesn't really matter. The point is Edwin.
I would say that sometimes you would hesitate on this play because Zephyrus is your best AoE, but Tom has Flick in hand and ready to go for next turn should he see a Glowfly. But what? He's
not playing it. Wow,
that can't be right.
He really wants to play defensive. I mean, all I can say is that I would have played Edwin within 3 seconds of having started that turn, which is also probably wrong because you're supposed to think about it. But I don't know. Yeah.
The Edwin sets up a 2-turn lethal quite nicely, and if there's a Glowfly, you flick it and you're good. Then you just do the 2-turn lethal. The only conclusion I'm coming to.
And you flick it.
Yeah, exactly. The only conclusion I'm coming to is that maybe Tom wasn't cognizant of Edwin as an option. I don't know. Maybe he's tunneled into thinking that this is AoE, I need to save this for the Glowflies, and there's nothing better it can give me. The Animal Companion isn't worth it, but I am definitely not getting behind that mindset.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, who knows? Maybe it's not a purely reactive Zephyrus. Maybe he's thinking if he can go... okay, there are actually other things he can think about. So if he goes Tiamat for Divine Shield and Wind Fury, and then goes Zephyrus into Blessed Champion, that is, 24 damage combo that he can set up over 2 turns. It obviously takes a little bit longer, and it is reliant on Glory not doing anything too scary. But you know, it's not completely ridiculous to hold on to Zephyrus there at all.
Right, but the 24 is what Edwin as an 8/8 would have done over 3 turns anyway.
Sure, yeah, sure.
But I guess let's give it the benefit of the doubt. Maybe the Edwin could have died to a very specific combination of removal spells. But honestly, I feel like that was a huge missed opportunity for Tom there.
Especially as this turn again is just another very passive turn. 2 turns in a row. He hasn't developed much of anything.
And it's funny that Tom's been holding on to all of this removal because Glory has not hit the Glowfly.
Oh my god!
Kilthas is just not having it today. He heard he was getting nerfed and he just walked out of the building.
But you know what? Now for Tom, he can actually set up, trade in the 2/3, play Tiamat, Divine Shield, Wind Fury, then go trade in the Mummy, so it even buffs the Tiamat.
Right. 7/7.
And then, yeah, 7/7 with Divine Shield. That's pretty hard to get rid of. I suppose double Bog Beam with a Moonfire would do it. But either way, it's setting up like basically a lethal setup unless your opponent removes it.
Yeah. Okay, granted, like 1+1 will get a lot done for Tom, and it just feels like he's had so many opportunities to like take the board for himself, make the game go a lot faster. And if we're using that maybe the Edwin could have been removed argument, it's the same argument for Tiamat, I suppose, would have taken 2 Moonfires and 2 Bog Beams, but still. And now, Glory's developed a board that isn't flickable.
Yeah.
Except for the Porcupines.
It's also pretty powerful. It is brawlable. however, though, here for the Zephyrus. And, you know, there is Zephyrus Shadow Step, and maybe Tom in his practice has yet a third way of thinking about Zephyrus. Not Edwin, not going for lethal, but with Shadow Step, he thinks he can just outlast all this pressure that Glory has thrown down. We've seen time and again against the Warrior, against the Priests, against the Warlocks, this Druid just running out of stuff. And Tom may have realized as early as the start of the game that he can just function as a control deck here.
Okay, making that argument, I guess, could have been a little bit too harsh regarding just him not playing aggressively enough. Specifically against Glory and Possessi's list, there is a very finite amount of threats. But
yeah.
I'm still not... Yeah, I'm still skeptical about the way Tom's played this.
I still don't think I agree with it, but it's clearly his thought process, right? And it has merit behind it.
He snap-picked the Dragonbane, but I was kind of enjoying looking at the option of, I don't even know the name of that card, but your rogue, you can take down opponent has a minion on board. So
what was it?
It's the legendary that summons something whenever your hero takes damage on your turn.
Oh, Zaraku. Yeah. That is very powerful.
I'm impressed you know the name.
Pleased, yeah.
Turns out you're not a new player. So Overflow, very sad turn for Glory here. Surely now the CMI or just something proactive.
Has to be time, yeah.
Anything, Tom. Anything proactive.
Wand, okay, sure.
These are not that... Okay, that's kind of proactive.
Yeah, well, the other thing is, though, is that the play that Tom went for of going Zephyrus, Step, Zephyrus again immediately to get another Brawl. Obviously, Brawl is likely to be good at some point in the game, but I actually wonder if he should have gone Zephyrus, Shadow Step, Brawl, and just hold on to the Zephyrus, because in any situation where you need a Brawl, Zephyrus will offer it, right? Like, he will give you what you need in terms of removal. But he could hold on to it so that he could play Siamat there, and then afterwards hope to go for a big swing, where he just goes for Blessed Champion into lethal.
Yeah, I get you. I hear you completely. Like, the whole options of flexibility, Tom has completely thrown them aside and just tunneled onto a pure control.
Like, what is this Brawl? Imagine if he had Bloodlust next turn with this board.
I mean, granted, his game plan probably never loses anyway, because Glory has not that many threats in the deck. But you're right, I completely agree. There's just so many better ways to go about this, in my opinion.
I think that milking Zephyrus for Brawls is not the way to go.
It's not the way you're meant to do it. It's supposed to give you the perfect card on that turn, not the perfect card to save for another turn.
Exactly.
Oh. Licking it.
Very cool animation.
It's very satisfying.
Yeah.
Except for the part where all the treants all come back.
I do like the idea of Zephyrus Flick just flying through the air, stabbing blowflies out of the sky.
It fits in perfectly with the card art.
So true.
I must have missed something. Why is the Alexstrasza not active?
Yeah, I was just about to say, it's... What did he randomly generate that shuffled into his deck?
Maybe. Beats me.
Darkness wanes.
I don't remember a scheme or anything being played.
Yeah, me neither. I'm sure I'm being very stupid, but... Either way, it doesn't really matter right now. He could still just throw it down as an 8-8 and it would probably be good enough to win the game right here. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. And it seems like Tom's taken a very meandering path to get to the ultimate goal.
Yes, well,
but
I
without a doubt, it will get him to that goal.
My main gripe with his play this game wasn't necessarily that he decided to go with the control route, because I think, you know, I trust him to have played this matchup, to have learned how it works, and I think that's fine. When you have Zephyrus and Shadow Step, you are likely to be able to find enough removal to survive the game. It's the fact that he played it for another brawl immediately that I thought was really egregious, because he could have saved it for a non-symmetrical board clear, maybe a Shadow Flame or a Consecration, a Flame Strike, something like that, that would have allowed him to keep up tempo whilst also killing his opponent's board. But instead he just got a Brawl, which here is way worse than, say, a Shadow Flame. Trade Shadow Flame with the Alex Strauss is GG.
It was the Albatross! But
Oh,
yes,
the Albatross.
you made a very, very succinct point towards out of my mouth, and honestly, I am a little bit disappointed. I feel like maybe Tom is not on top of his game here. I forget if it was from him also where we saw a bit of a mistake in the micro trades when he was on Zoom and using the Lackey for Rush. So hoping to see a little bit more refinement and focus in the coming weeks. But it is just week 1, and as much as we will admit to being rusty, and I will admit to being extremely rusty, I can't be too hard on the players who have not had all that much time on the new expansion and not that much time playing competitive Hearthstone for a while, I guess.
That's right. So it is going to be Glowfly now, obviously. Wrath, I suppose, to take out the Alex. You could then trade in the Porcupine, I suppose, and hope to snipe the Flick as well. But I don't know. I don't think it gets there with the Brawl. I think that's just going to be game yet again.
As much as we have with Tom's play, again, we have more gripes with Glory's deck list. And Possessies, to be completely fair, we can't just like put it all on Glory just because Possessi managed to make it through. It just does seem like if the very fact that you're not running a Forest 8 allows the Rogue to play so comfortably and honestly subpar like this, then you could be doing something better with the deck list.
And that's the thing, every time that this Druid deck has lost, I think it's pretty much just been that it's been exhausted of resources. I suppose, apart from the Zoo, which it got aggroed down. But against a Highlander Rogue, you're not supposed to run out of stuff. You're supposed to be able to go into the super late game and beat them there, but Glory was unable to do so. We had a couple of gripes with the way that Tom was executing his game plan, but overall, it was quite clearly a more than good enough game plan to win the game.
I will say Glory is incredibly good at finding lethal on himself.
If no one else.
And he made the point, though, that apart from the Zoo, I would actually argue that even in the Zoo matchup, anytime in the last 4 turns or so, if he had run more of a board development, could have made a huge difference. And we are talking about this in the world where Kael'thas was discarded, like 3 times for Glory today alone?
That is also true. That is also true.
But yeah, definitely I think both players could have done something different, either with the gameplay or the preparation.
But either way, that does mean that Tom is going to be staying alive here in this week's Swiss tournament. Glory, unfortunately, is going to be going, well, I was going to say going home. He's already home, but he'll be back next week for another Swiss phase in week 2 of Grandmasters. Still, you know, I imagine he was practicing with Possessi at some point, given they ended up with a couple of identical deck lists. So I'm sure he'll be cheering him on from the sidelines, which we can see where Possessi is going to be playing up next. He'll already be through, but we can take a look at the bracket to see who will be joining him in the top 4 tomorrow. Rivius versus Tom is going to be our final match. Loser out, winner goes through to the semi-finals. Who are you liking, Gia?
Well, I gotta say, even when Rivius was up against Possessi, I liked his lineup for the match. Didn't quite pan out the way he wanted, but again, I think that Rivius just has the superior lineup out of everyone we've seen this weekend, including in the other group. And so I'd put him as a favorite against Tom, especially factoring in that we probably don't some of the plays Tom has been making. Although Tom did just come out sweep, and that speaks to, at the very least, his mental fortitude throughout the day.
Absolutely. I feel like tom60229 is consistently one of the most relaxed players in Hearthstone Grandmasters, which sounds like a veiled insult. It's honestly not. It's a lot of the players last year were roping out a lot of their turns. They were starting to get in their own heads, second-guessing their plays. None of that from Tom. You know, he knew what he wanted to do right from the start of the turn, even if he wasn't necessarily at the the cutting edge of the newest deck archetypes, or he was messing up a couple of trades here and there. He was his mental game is clearly very much on point.
And that will be perhaps one of his most important assets as he goes up against Rivius, who not only had a very strong start in Swiss, but also had a very good lineup going into the group stages. He played quite well, I would say, against Possessi. I don't recall any plays that we outright disagreed with.
Yeah.
Not that our agreement is an indicator of the quality of the play, but yeah, Rivius versus Tom, definitely going to be a good one. And yet again, I have some concerns for that zoo of Tom's.
Well, we'll have to see in the next match. The final Asia-Pacific match of today before we roll you over to Europe and Americas will come up right after this short break.